Welcome back to Asleep Cinema, dear Dreamseeker. Before you let the velvet hush of night fold over your thoughts, remember to wander down to the comments and softly share the next film you'd like to drift off to sleep to. Breathe in, feel the weight of the blankets settle like warm sand along a quiet shore, and let today's cinematic lullaby begin its slow, consoling rhythms. Tonight, we journey to Ridley Scott's Gladiator II, a legacy sequel released in late 2024 that returns us to marble colonnades, whispering cypress trees, and the dusty gold of the Roman afternoon. While the first film closed with the sacrifice of Maximus and the promise of a freer Senate, this continuation invites us to dwell 16 years farther down the river of time, when Rome's political soil has sprouted new weeds of corruption under the twin emperors Geta and Caracalla. Around the Mediterranean, grain fleets still glide upon glittering currents, but the people who load them speak more softly now, wary of spies and levy officers. Far to the south, in the sun-baked kingdom of Numidia, a quiet life hums for Lucius Verus. Aurelius, once the wide-eyed youth who watched a gladiator defy an emperor, now a grown man who has set his heart on peace. This stretch of years, enough for scars to pale, enough for memories to settle into deep chambers of the mind, forms the shimmering surface of our tale, one we will explore with care and contemplative ease. The film greets us with lush establishing vistas of Numidia's ochre hillsides, where olive trees cast lace-like shadows over clay houses, and grazing goats ring soft bells as though keeping time with the midday cicadas. Ridley Scott's lens floats rather than springs, encouraging the viewer's pulse to slow as it surveys Lucius's homestead. We find him tending a modest vineyard alongside his beloved wife Arishot, their laughter carrying like distant flutes across sunlit terraces. The screenplay, penned by David Scarpa, chooses a tone of tempered optimism here, painting Lucius not as a restless warrior, but as a gardener of both earth and memory. He has placed the tragedy of his childhood, Rome's intrigues, the blood-wet sand of the Colosseum, into a silent reliquary deep within. Yet, as the olive leaves shimmer in the breeze, fate is already pressing its thumb upon the delicate seal of that reliquary. A faint clang of distant iron, almost indistinguishable at first from a shepherd's staff against a stone, hints that Rome's legions are again on the march. Gentle reader, imagine the afternoon air growing still as muffled drums pulse beneath the horizon. General Justus Acacius, trained in older campaigns under the late Maximus, advances with banners whose crimson threads snap in the wind like impatient spirits. The twin emperors, obsessed with expanding dominion eastward, have commanded Acacius to seize Numidia's granaries. In Ridley Scott's framing, the invasion approaches like a storm cloud, shadows flickering across wheat fields until the grain heads bow, as though in uneasy prayer. The battle that follows is swift, choreographed with the painterly restraint that defines Scott's mature work. Arishot falls, a silent figure cradled by Lucius amid the burning whispers of thatch. We watch from a lingering high angle, distant enough that the clamor seems softened by a cocoon of shocked breath, as if the world itself is reluctant to shout. In this muted chaos, Lucius is chained, his wrists encircled by bronze cuffs that glint with cold authority. The camera then lingers on a single grapevine leaf curling in a gust, an echo of severed peace. From here, the film escorts us aboard creaking slave galleys bound for Ostia. The hold is dim, lit only by lattice sunlight that stripes the prisoners' faces and turns dust motes into ephemeral constellations. Scott's sound design layers hushed murmurs, the sway of water against hull, and the faint clatter of shackles, creating an almost lullaby-like rhythm despite the harsh reality. In these shadows, Lucius meets Jugurtha, an elder chieftain from the African interior whose voice, low and resonant, becomes a sonic anchor. Their conversations are filmed in close, shallow focus, faces half-lit like Caravaggio saints, emphasizing inward reflection over outward spectacle. Lucius speaks little. Jugurtha intuits much, recognizing a fire behind the younger man's measured gaze. Such quiet character building allows the audience to settle into contemplative empathy, rather than bracing for immediate arena spectacle. When the galley finally noses into Ostia's bustling harbor, the shift in atmosphere is striking yet restrained. The market square is crowded, but cinematographer John Mathieson keeps most figures blurred in the periphery, guiding our attention gently toward the stable master Macrinus, once a slave himself, now wealthy through gladiator brokerage. His eyes, sharp above a subtle smile, appraise the new captives not as souls but as potential coin. Macrinus orders a demonstration bout, not against men but against baboons imported from distant forests, their shrieks echoing along stone arches. This surreal cruelty serves two purposes: to thrill jaded Roman merchants and to test the mettle of the enslaved. Lucius, still shell-shocked, hesitates. It is Hanno, a Numidian blacksmith, captured with him, who first raises a staff in defiance. The film lingers on Hanno's labored breathing, the way his grip tightens, fingertips whitening like marble. The scene, though tense, is edited with elongated cuts rather than rapid flashes, maintaining a meditative cadence even amid danger. When Lucius finally intervenes, driving a makeshift spear between a baboon and Hanno, the slow-motion frames capture droplets of dust swirling like golden pollen, as if valor itself has a tangible texture. We cut to Rome under a humid dawn. The Colosseum's arches are kissed by rose-colored light, and vendors unfurl striped awnings the hue of faded terracotta. Senators in loose togas glide across marble forecourts like slow-moving chess pieces, discussing war levies and grain tariffs with silk voices. The twin emperors, Gita and Caracalla, preside in a gilded courtyard lined with caged panthers, the animals pacing a visual echo of their master's restlessness. Joseph Quinn and Fred Hechinger imbue the brothers with complementary flavors of instability. Geta exudes sly petulance, fingers forever drumming. Caracalla's gaze flickers unpredictably, as though tracking invisible fireflies. Yet, for all their menace, the film couches their scenes in languid camera moves and mellow lighting, preventing adrenaline spikes that might jolt the nocturnal listener. Instead, political tension drifts like incense smoke, acrid yet slow. General Acacius's arrival at court offers a tender undercurrent, for he is greeted by Lucilla, the mother who once shielded Lucius. Connie Nielsen returns with a presence both regal and weary, as though she has memorized the weight of imperial corridors upon her shoulders. Acacius confides his fatigue with endless campaigns, a confession captured in a single, elongated shot that holds his profile against a mosaic of Jupiter restraining lightning bolts. Visual irony that strengthens thematic threads without raising the viewer's heart rate. Acacius longs for respite, yet Rome's appetite remains a gnawing maw. Meanwhile, hidden in a holding barracks beneath the city, Lucius sharpens a gladius edge. Sparks leap and fade in the gloom like fireflies over a summer pond, silent witnesses to awakening purpose. The first official gladiatorial bout forms the closing tableau of this gentle segment. Paradoxically, Scott invests the sequence with grandeur while tempering its violence through poetic visuals, arena sand blowing in slow eddies, the sun seen through netting overhead, the muffled heartbeat drum of the score overriding clanging steel. Lucius and Hanno fight side by side against seasoned veterans, their choreography infused with more defense than aggression, echoing their internal reluctance. At one moment, Lucius parries a trident, and the camera lingers on a single grain of sand striking his cheek, an infinitesimal wound that speaks louder than arterial sprays. When victory is achieved, Macrinus raises his hand toward the imperial box, where Caracalla lazily tosses grapes to his pet monkey. The emperor's sluggish clap is less applause than perfunctory punctuation. Yet Lucius, chest heaving, finds his gaze drawn beyond the pomp to a thin corridor of sky overhead, blue and boundless, a whisper that freedom remains an idea worth chasing. As night drapes the Colosseum in lilac shadow, torches flicker against stone walls, casting slow-moving halos that seem to rock like cradles. Lucius, weary but unbroken, washes striations of dust from his hands, watching the water darken like stirred tea. He closes his eyes and hears the distant roar of Numidian cicadas, an auditory bridge between the world he lost and the uncertain path ahead. In this pillow-soft fade-out, the film draws us gently toward rest. Its final image before slumber is a candle flame reflected in Lucius's eye, bending and straightening as though breathing. Thus concludes our first quiet stretch down the Via Sacra of Gladiator II, a path lined with memories, murmurs, and the early seeds of rebellion. Allow the imagery to settle like fine silt in a still pond and drift deeper, knowing our story will continue, with unhurried purpose, when you are ready for the next gentle tide of words. Drowsy hours pass, and when the lanterns hung about the Colosseum gutter into low crescents of amber, our story resumes with the hush of late-night corridors echoing soft sandal steps and the distant coo of pigeons nesting in marble eaves. In the first faint breaths of Part 2, Lucius lies in a curtained cubiculum within the gladiators' barracks, the hum of torchfire drawing lazy shapes across the ceiling. Sleep hovers but does not fully claim him, for each tolling heartbeat opens another memory door. He sees Arashat laughing by the vineyard press, hears the fizz of fermenting grapes, and almost tastes the honeyed horizon of Numidia again. Yet Rome intrudes, bringing the faint stink of iron and tallow. Ridley Scott renders these nocturnal visions with a palette of indigo and ochre, accentuating how fragile dreams look beside rough-hewn stone. The camera glides rather than cuts, encouraging a lull that lets our own pulses slow in sympathy. When dawn arrives, it does so gently, painting the barracks windows with rose-gray light that diffuses through linen like watered wine. Jugurtha greets Lucius with that sonorous baritone that rolls like a lullaby across the straw mats. The elder speaks of silent resistance, how a reed bends in wind yet survives the storm that snaps the cedar. His philosophy offers an exhale to viewers, providing emotional slack between the film's set pieces. This contemplative tone echoes Scott's late career focus on inner resilience rather than spectacle alone, distinguishing the sequel from its predecessor's more rousing cadence. Across the city, morning dew settles on travertine porticos where Senator Thrax, robed in ivory yet smelling faintly of dice hall smoke, scrolls bets on wax tablets. Tim McInerney plays him with velvet resignation, a man so entangled in debt that each breath seems borrowed. His patron this day is Macrinus, whose measured stride and half-lidded gaze signal a mind always composing stratagems. Denzel Washington imbues Macrinus with a subdued gravity, every gesture controlled, every syllable weighed, as though he speaks in musical rests more than in notes. Costume designer Janty Yates dresses him in charcoal blue tunics whose muted trims catch only the softest light, ensuring his power feels whispered rather than shouted. A mid-morning scene follows Lucilla gliding through the imperial garden, her silken stola trailing like quiet surf upon marble. Connie Nielsen's return gifts the sequel its tether to the original era, and the film bathes her in warm dawn hues that soften every edge. She pauses by a lotus pond whose glassy surface shows twin reflections of her sons, Gaeta and Caracalla approach, their laughter brittle, like porcelain tapping against itself. Joseph Quinn's Gaeta rifles absent-mindedly through orange blossoms, letting petals fall as though discarding favors. Fred Hechinger's Caracalla checks his own reflection in the water, smiling at ripples that fracture his image. Yet the scene never crescendos. Composer Harry Gregson Williams sustains only a sighing motif of reeds and wooden flute, encouraging a somnolent calm even as tension webs beneath the dialogue. Soon after, Lucilla descends a corkscrew stair into the subterranean cells. Her lamp casts a trembling saffron nimbus that catches upon iron bars. There, separated by a lattice of shadow, she sees Lucius, her son, though he remains unaware of her presence. The camera lingers on her fingertips, stretching forward, not quite touching the bars, and on the soft expansion of her chest, as she quenches a silent sob. A measured breath, another, and she retreats without waking him. Such restraint echoes the film's wider thesis, that some acts of love are gentle enough to remain unheard. In the narrative flow, days blend, each marked by progressively grander spectacles. The second featured combat sequence occurs on a temporary Numidia arena flooded by diverted aqueduct water, transforming the amphitheater floor into a shimmering lagoon. Ridley Scott saturates this set piece with pearlescent reflections, encouraging our eyes to settle into the hypnotic pulse of ripples, rather than the clash of oars and shields. Paul Mescal's physicality, as Lucius is showcased here, in strokes that resemble slow water choreography, each breath measured, every movement slicing arcs through the glowing surface. The film's visual effects team, nominated for recreating Rome's watery battlegrounds with photoreal serenity, ensures droplets glide in high frame detail, merging violence and beauty into a lullaby of silvery splashes. When Lucius and Hanno prevail, the crowd response is curiously muted, as though the spectacle's novelty has numbed their appetite. This tonal choice underlines the screenplay's quiet critique of excess. When noise is constant, silence becomes subversive. Macrinus, seated with a feline half-smile, notes the restlessness blossoming among plebeian spectators whose rations have grown thinner under new taxes. He whispers to Senator Threx that a hungry crowd needs only a spark. Threx, however, replies that sparks require tinder, and Macrinus has been buying up kindling for years. Their conversation drifts like a lull in music, guidance rather than alarm. Behind the arena, dressing stalls glow with lamplight that flickers against coarse linen drapes. Jugurtha binds a small cut on Lucius's forearm, reminding him that scars are maps, each marking a place where life insisted on staying. Lucius, voice low, confesses that every strike he parries against fellow captives feels like tearing a page from his own story. Jugurtha rests a palm upon his shoulder and speaks of rivers, how they change course many times yet still sing the same song. This metaphor settles over the scene like mist, soothing both warrior and watcher. As summer presses onward, Rome's humidity hangs like damp silk. Citizens whisper about grain shortages and rising arena ticket prices, while heralds announce new levies for the eastern frontier. Ridley Scott uses ambient street tableaus, vendors stacking chipped amphorae, water sellers nodding off beside empty cisterns, to convey decline without overt narration. Political murmurs become background rainfall, steady and soporific. Within the palace, Lucilla learns of a covert plot. Macrinus intends to leverage his stable of champion gladiators to stage a public revolt during the next festival of Mars. His goal is to depose the twin emperors and install a more pliable senate, one that will pardon his debts and legitimize his wealth. Yet beneath that pragmatic surface flickers something almost righteous. Macrinus, born a slave, longs to prove that the empire's iron hierarchy can be bent by those it once shackled. Denzel Washington plays this complexity with symphonic restraint, eyelids heavy yet mind-racing, voice velvet yet edged with volcanic motive. Lucilla weighs her options in a candlelit study whose walls display faded frescoes of victory gods. She lays a hand upon a cracked depiction of Victoria, her fingers tracing chipped wings, contemplating whether any political outcome could truly safeguard her son. The film's mise en scène underscores fragility. Plaster flakes drift like ash, each tiny fall tickling the soundtrack with barely audible taps that evoke restless sands in an hourglass. Lucius, unaware of these machinations, visits a small shrine hidden behind amphitheater ladders. There he finds a wooden figurine carved to resemble Hercules grappling a lion, left as an offering by a fellow fighter. Lucius kneels, pressing two fingertips to the figurine's mane, and murmurs a prayer for courage. Words are soft, unembellished. Let me be strong enough to guard the innocent, gentle enough to spare the weak, and wise enough to know which voice is mine. The absence of quotation marks invites us to experience the prayer as thought rather than dialogue, blending seamlessly with our own inner murmurs. The festival spectacle introduces a novelty: roaring mechanical lions sculpted of brass, propelled by concealed slaves turning wooden cogs. Their jointed jaws open slowly, emitting resin-fed flames whose tongues dance lethargically in the warm afternoon. Lucius and his cohort must maneuver around these lumbering constructs while engaging Praetorian champions clad in vermilion. On paper, the threat appears immense, yet Scott choreographs movements so that combatants circle each other in elongated arcs, like planets suspended in stately orbit. Sparks drift upward from the lions' mouths, tracing lazy spirals before fading into twilight. Even crescendo moments arrive softened, allowing bedtime listeners to remain afloat on calm tides of imagery. By bout's end, Lucius earns a title whispered through the terraces, the Numidian torch, a nod to the flicker of brazier light upon his sun-browned skin and the sudden flare of hope he represents. Macrinus greets him beneath a marble arch, offering cool water and a measured superstition. Fire that burns slow outlasts storm wind. Lucius answers with a faint nod, neither assent nor refusal, the ambiguity and ember smoldering for later ignition. Night settles, dense and velvety, across Rome's 7 hills. Far from the palace, children light small terracotta lamps along insula stairwells, watching tiny flames shiver like timid hearts. Lucius stands at a barred window high in the barracks wall, gazing upon those scattered constellations of man-made stars. For a heartbeat, he imagines Maximus gazing back through memory's veil, offering silent counsel, strength, and honor. A phrase recurs, unspoken yet patent, resonating like the distant drone of ocean surge, steady, cyclical, calming. We conclude this gentle passage with a single, unhurried image: Lucius's hand resting on the cool stone windowsill, fingertips tracing grooves etched by prisoners long gone. Wind sighs through the aperture, carrying the faint scent of myrtle and hot bread cooling in bakeries 2 streets away. He closes his eyes, and so may we, settling deeper under our covers. The story has woven new threads of intrigue, resilience, and quiet revolt, yet it carries them like soft reeds floating upon a tranquil stream. Feel the gentle current tug you onward, knowing that when the next part arrives, it will glide as soothingly as the last, ushering you ever farther into Rome's twilight calm. Midsummer settles over Rome like gauze, and the nights grow quiet and warm, perfect for drifting further into our tale of Gladiator III. When we left Lucius gazing at the city's firefly lamps, the Festival of Mars had only just wrapped its silken threads of spectacle. Now, as moonlight slides down the travertine flanks of the Colosseum, an almost imperceptible shift in the Empire's pulse begins. Somewhere beyond the arena walls, a baker bangs stale loaves into crumbs for pigeons, each soft thump echoing like a muffled timpani and announcing the slow approach of change. Ridley Scott's camera carries us gently into the sleeping capital at this hour, hovering over terracotta roofs where stray cats stretch and over narrow alleys that smell faintly of lavender discarded from the public baths. The score by Harry Gregson Williams murmurs with low harp notes and a single bassoon, its timbre round and soothing. It is here, in this hush, that Macrinus initiates quiet conspiracies. The man Denzel Washington embodies with velvet menace purchases entire pallets of grain, instructing his factor to store them in hidden subterranean vaults stacked beneath a decommissioned Mithraic temple. Rumor soon trickles through insula stairwells that bread rations have been halved again, and though citizens mutter, their voices never rise above the soft rustle of palms in the foreign breeze. Washington's Macrinus, a former slave turned magnate, sees scarcity as tinder for rebellion. Yet the film always cushions this ambition in measured tones rather than explosive declarations. Across the city, Lucilla stands alone on a portico facing the Aventine Hill. The dawn that unveils her is pearly and demure, its diffused glow catching in her silvered hair. A fragment of lark song lifts, then drifts away. Connie Nielsen inhabits Lucilla as both grieving mother and reluctant stateswoman, her gesture small enough to lull us toward rest. The slow smoothing of a sleeve, a fingertip tracing the lip of a marble balustrade, She has learned of Macrinus's scheme and contemplates whether to warn her sons, Gaeta, ever calculating, and Caracalla, ever volatile, or to let events unfold in hopes that tyranny might topple itself. Such moral crossroads, presented in soft chiaroscuro instead of stark contrast, give the film its contemplative cadence. Morning finds Lucius once more on the practiced sands. He kneels over a spilled basket of wheat kernels, idly sifting them through calloused fingers. As each seed drops, the camera lingers long enough for us to count heartbeats between grains, a visual echo of Maximus's famous gesture with earth in the original film, Paul Mescal's performance. His first headline role of this scale, after a string of intimate dramas, radiates quiet interiority. He acts with the smallest flex of jaw muscle, the slow lifting of lashes. Nearby, Hanno hums a melody from their homeland, little more than 3 drifting notes, repeating until it melts into the background chatter of sparrows. Ridley Scott allows the scene to unfurl unhurried, every cut delayed just beyond expectation, training us to breathe more slowly, to let eyelids grow heavier. Soon thereafter, General Marcus Acacius arrives at the barracks with a leather-bound roster. Played by Pedro Pascal with understated fatigue, Acacius seems less the conquering hero of Senate gossip and more a soldier exhausted by victories that taste of ashes. The IMDb synopsis merely hints that he and Lucius share bruised histories, but Scott's film reveals their bond, gradually through half-spoken memories traded beneath flickering torches. Acacius inspects the gladiators, pausing when he reaches Lucius. His gaze drifts, not to the sword at Lucius's hip, but to the old imperial seal burned into Lucius's shoulder, branding from childhood that once marked him a noble ward. Recognition passes between them like a moth's wingbeat, delicate, fleeting, yet unmistakable. Both men choose silence, and the scene ends with Acacius turning away, boots making almost no sound on compacted sand. Throughout these sequences, production designer Arthur Max adorns corridors with faded frescoes of harvest gods, flaked and muted as though time itself wishes not to disturb us. Lanterns are coated with a thin vellum that diffuses flame into a watercolor glow, ensuring every passageway resembles a candlelit monastery rather than a house of slaughter. Scott's deliberate visual hush underscores an emerging thesis that power, cruelty, and rebellion need not scream to be felt. They can whisper and still topple empires. A few languid days later, the emperors decree a maritime spectacle to eclipse the earlier Naumachia. Pipes are opened, the arena floor floods once more, and wooden dromons painted imperial purple drift atop the new lake, their oar strokes slow enough to be mistaken for ritual dance. Gaeta demands a demonstration of Roman might against mythic beasts, and so handlers unveil a rhinoceros modeled after those rumored in Nubia. In reality, behind the scenes, the production sculpted the creature with radio-controlled hydraulics and 3D printed plates, an engineering feat reported by film journalists during the 2023 shoot that saw crews adapting to scorching temperatures on Maltese sets. On screen, however, the beast snarls in stylized slow motion. Even its roar seems padded with velvet. Lucius's cohort is ordered to confront the creature. The bout unfurls like a dream. Weapons splash and paint thick water. Sunlight refracts through rising mist, and the rhinoceros moves less like an engine of death than a melancholy relic woken from centuries of stillness. Mescal channels trepidation, not aggression, and guides the enormous animal toward a calm corner rather than slaying it outright. The choice invites a hush from the crowd, for mercy amid spectacle is a subversive lull. Macrinus's eyebrow lifts, one more ember for later. After nightfall, Lucius retreats to the physician's alcove, where Jugurtha tends bruises with poultices smelling of chamomile. The elder recounts star lore. He points to the narrow window where Lyra rises and spins ancient stories of Orpheus lulling beasts with song. It is an anecdote delivered in near whisper, the syllables rolling like pebbles in a tide pool. Listeners might feel their own breathing converge with Jugurtha's cadence, a syncopated duet between screen and bedside. In parallel, Scott offers a glimpse of the emperors in their private study. Geta thumbs through ivory chess pieces carved into gladiatorial poses, while Caracalla dips quills in violet ink, drafting edicts that tighten grain quotas. They speak in clipped Latin phrases, yet the scene is shot at such distance that only soft echoes reach us, indistinct enough to maintain drowsy immersion. An oil lamp sputters, giving off a low hiss like distant rainfall. The sound persists as Lucius, miles away, sinks into restless sleep, binding separate locations via a shared sonic thread. Near dawn, Macrinus slips through a slave gate into the hypogeum, lantern hooded to a pinprick glow. He gathers Lucius, Hanno, and 3 other victors, calloused men whose shoulders glisten in the dimness, and outlines his vision at the upcoming Imperial Jubilee, when the Colosseum will host foreign dignitaries and show greater pageantry than ever. These fighters will stage not a revolt but a revelation. He spreads a tattered map across a wine crate, taps marked sewer routes that converge beneath the Imperial box, and tells of stored grain, ready to be distributed to the mob once the emperors are distracted. His voice is low, each syllable spaced like beads on a rosary, so even conspiracy takes on the hush of bedtime ritual. Lucius listens yet hesitates, his mind traveling backward to vineyards and the laughter of Arishat. He speaks only once, to ask what becomes of innocent bystanders. Macrinus replies that Rome herself is no innocent. She has been devouring her children for centuries. The line is delivered with a sigh, not thunder, drifting into torch smoke. Meanwhile, the emperors grow frantic. Geta clutches at embroidered skirts, demanding someone restore order, while Caracalla hurls a chalice whose clang rings like a dissonant bell. Yet sound design lowers their shrill tones beneath the mix, prioritizing the hushed movements of ordinary people hauling children up stone steps. The climactic tension resides not in volume, but in gravity, a slow pull downward of all our hearts as water climbs each tier. Lucilla, from a shadowed archway, witnesses her son marshal strangers into human chains, passing infants overhead to safety. Tears shimmer, but do not spill. She presses both palms once against her heart, then retreats to fetch litters for the wounded. Her silhouette, framed by torch-lit mist, evokes a votive icon of steadfast maternal grace. Macrinus's coup fizzles as moments stretch. He comes to stand upon a floating platform surrounded by unclaimed grain, the mob more interested in survival than political theater. Denzel Washington lets shoulders slump the subtlest degree. A dream deflates with barely a sound. Yet in his eyes glints something like peace, as though the water has washed bitterness loose. The flood recedes by dusk, drained by engineers carving relief channels. Galleries glisten, reflecting torchlight until the whole stadium looks cast in amber glass. Survivors move like ghosts through shimmering corridors, their shock tamped down into weary silence. Lucius, soaked and bruised, finds himself at the center of a gathering where gladiators, soldiers, citizens, and freed slaves clasp arms in mutual relief. The camera encircles them slowly, each orbit an invitation to deeper breathing. Imperial retribution will arrive with the sunrise, but the film lets this night linger. A hush blankets Rome that is thicker than any decree. We see Macrinus, unchained yet spent, sit alone beside a cracked statue of Fortuna and exhale. We see a Cassius write a terse report, words forming like falling petals. We see Jugurtha lift his face to stars and whisper names of constellations, as though introducing old friends to newcomers. Each vignette ebbs into the next without fanfare, offering listeners gentle stepping stones toward slumber. In closing this quiet chapter, Ridley Scott frames Lucius once more at the barracks window. Outside, the city's lamps still burn, but their fire feels tamer, respectful of the silence earned. Lucius leans his forehead against cool stone, letting eyelids drift until torch halos blur into soft circles of gold. The final image before today's rest is a single droplet, a remnant of the flood, slipping from his chin to the sill and resting there, round and still, reflecting the lantern as a tiny sun ready to rise when we return. Let that droplet be our marker, poised on the cusp of tomorrow. Breathe deeply, surrender weight to the mattress, and allow your heartbeat to slow in rhythm with Rome's softened pulse. The tale will flow onward, always unhurried. When next you seek the gentle tides of a sleep cinema, imperial retribution will arrive with the sunrise, but the film lets this night linger. A hush blankets Rome that is thicker than any decree. We see Macrinus, unchained yet spent, sit alone beside a cracked statue of Fortuna and exhale. We see a Cassius write a terse report, words forming like falling petals. We see Jugurtha lift his face to stars and whisper names of constellations, as though introducing old friends to newcomers. Each vignette ebbs into the next without fanfare, offering listeners gentle stepping stones toward slumber. In closing this quiet chapter, Ridley Scott frames Lucius once more at the barracks window. Outside, the city's lamps still burn, but their fire feels tamer, respectful of the silence earned. Lucius leans his forehead against cool stone, letting eyelids drift until torch halos blur into soft circles of gold. The final image before today's rest is a single droplet, a remnant of the flood, slipping from his chin to the sill and resting there, round and still, reflecting the lantern as a tiny sun ready to rise when we return. Let that droplet be our marker, poised on the cusp of tomorrow. Breathe deeply, surrender weight to the mattress, and allow your heartbeat to slow in rhythm with Rome's softened pulse. The tale will flow onward, always unhurried, when next you seek the gentle tides of a sleep cinema. The hush that blankets Rome after the Jubilee flood lingers like a light fog, and dawn eases over the city, with such restraint that even the sparrows wait a heartbeat longer before calling. Torches along the Via Sacra smolder rather than blaze, their embers delicate, as if Rome herself is tiptoeing for fear of waking too many memories at once. Lucius opens his eyes to this shy dawn and discovers a calm that feels almost borrowed, as though the night loaned him a pocket of stillness he must soon return. He dresses without hurry, tugging soft linen over bruises that have shifted from purple to lavender, each a muted testament to yesterday's trials. Paul Mescal's measured movements underscore Ridley Scott's choice to favor introspection over frenzy, reminding us again that Gladiator II is less a rousing march than a long, low hymn to resilience. Word of the flood has swept through Rome's corridors like a silent tide. Grain rations appear on doorsteps at sunrise, loaves stamped with the mark of Macrinus, whose midnight scheme failed to foment rebellion, yet still fed the hungry. Denzel Washington's character passes among the poor in a hooded cloak, distributing what stores remain from his hidden vaults. He whispers, "Eat, strengthen your bones, no coin needed today." The lines on his face ease for the first time, and the camera lingers as he lifts a child's chin so gently that the boy's blink seems slow enough to ripple time. This tableau offers more balm than agitation, reinforcing the film's bedtime cadence even as it nudges larger questions of power and mercy. Meanwhile, imperial wrath germinates in quieter soil. Within marble chambers lined by faded frescoes, Caracalla drafts edicts to restore dignity through firmness, while Geta paces beside a caged kestrel, whose clipped wings beat dust into sunbeams. The Emperor's dialogue is filmed from a distance, the words softened by corridor echoes, until they become little more than textured murmurs, an auditory choice that lets the viewer drift rather than jolt. They decree that the Colosseum remain closed for repairs, its hypogeum drained and sanctified by augurs. For a city addicted to spectacle, this sudden silence feels like a held breath. Scott uses that hush as a lullaby, allowing city sounds to recede until we hear only the faint trickle of water leaving subterranean cisterns. General Cassius, ever the weary sentinel, receives orders to arrest Macrinus on charges of treason. Pedro Pascal gives the general a quiet solemnity, sad eyes underlined by a resolve not unlike a shepherd guiding restless flocks. He strides through morning mist toward the market district where Macrinus hands out bread. Their meeting unfolds with almost ceremonial calm. Macrinus extends his wrists before the general can ask. "No need for chains, brother," his voice like velvet draped over stone. Acacius nods, gesturing 2 Praetorians forward, but he speaks in tones as soft as lullaby refrain. "You will come with us, and you will be treated with respect." Even in peril, conversation glides without spikes in volume, letting listeners nestle deeper beneath quilts. News of the arrest reaches Lucilla as she tends to wounded citizens in a basilica now serving as infirmary. Connie Nielsen's portrayal of deep-water poise stands at the story's moral fulcrum. Every motion is slow enough to soothe. She brushes a feverish child's hair from his forehead, stands, breathes once, and sets out for the Senate. Here, Scott grants us a gentle walking montage along colonnades filmed in Malta's Fort Ricasoli, one of the principal locations that doubled for ancient Rome during the 2023 shoot. Its weathered limestone glowing honey, soft under early light. Each footfall on flagstones echoes like a ticking clock measured in heartbeats. At the Senate, Lucilla petitions for clemency. Senators, robed in muted ochres and dusty greens, tilt their heads like drowsy owls. She asks that Macrinus face trial, not summary execution, reminding Rome that mercy is the first stone in rebuilding any bridge. Her words glide across the chamber in a single continuous shot, so the speech feels less political than prayerful. When she finishes, silence reigns for 12 cinematic seconds, Scott daring the audience to linger with her invulnerability. Only then does Thrax, voice husky with sleeplessness, murmur assent. While these negotiations unfold, Lucius helps laborers clear silt from the arena's lower corridors. He lifts buckets slowly, breathes through each motion, shoulders loosening one knot at a time. The work party pauses often, listening to water drip into barrels, each plink soft as a raindrop against parchment. Jugurtha joins him, the elder's steady hands guiding broken tiles back into place like puzzle pieces. Between breaths, Jugurtha shares another shard of cosmic lore. The constellation we call the Reed bends itself across the sky each year, never snapping, always returning. His tone, low and rhythmic, beguiles even the pigeons roosting above the archways. Their coos become part of his lull. By twilight, Lucius finds himself summoned to Lucilla's private garden, where lanterns float in shallow basins, their flames trembling on watery mirrors. Mother and son stand apart at first, the gap between them crowded by unspoken seasons of loss. Lucilla speaks, voice a hush. Rome's heart is sick, yet it still beats. You can be its healer or its sword. Lucius answers in even softer cadence, I wish to be its salve if Rome will let itself be mended. They do not embrace. Their reunion is a lingering gaze, a communion of breaths shared under cypress silhouettes. Composer Harry Gregson Williams threads a faint motif of lyre and distant wind, notes so delicate they seem to rest atop the score rather than sink into it. The next morning, Hoptholm Caracalla convenes a tribunal outside the repaired arena, determined to stage justice as theater even while the Colosseum remains shuttered for games. Macrinus stands at the center of a semicircle of senators and soldiers, the sun behind him casting a penumbra that frames his silhouette like ink bleeding into paper. Caracalla reads charges in clipped Latin. Geta, fidgeting, plucks feathers from his plume fan, one by one, each tiny rip audible but oddly comforting. Lucius and Acacius are stationed opposite one another, both silent. When Caracalla calls for immediate execution, Lucilla steps forward, raising a single hand like a dove taking flight. She argues that Rome's greatness has always rested on its capacity for clemency. Her speech drifts rather than soars, and, in drifting, it entrances. The tribunal's murmur subsides into reverent quiet. Lucius then requests permission to speak. He walks slowly until he faces Macrinus. "You saved lives when the flood came," he says, voice level as a placid lake. Rome must measure both the spark and the water that followed. The emperors falter. Scott frames the moment with a gentle zoom on Caracalla's eyes as the young ruler calculates. Ultimately, perhaps swayed by the crowd's serene attentiveness, Caracalla commutes the sentence to exile in Numidia. The decree falls not like thunder, but like soft rain, dissolving tension rather than cracking it. Later, Acacius escorts Macrinus to the Ostian quay. Ships bob in a lull tide, sails furled like sleeping swans. The general unlocks Macrinus's manacles in silence, and the two men stare across the Tyrrhenian Sea, where dusk ignites a copper path. Washington's Macrinus offers a thin smile. "We are all slaves to Rome in one way or another." Acacius replies, "We choose how quietly our chains sing." They clasp forearms once, then release. No fanfare, no heralds, just the hush of waves and gulls dipping wings. Back inside Rome, Lucilla and Lucius tour granaries now refilled through imperial edict. An attempt to repair trust. Workers sweep grain into cedar bins, their brooms whisking in a rhythm that could lull even the busiest mind. Lucius pauses to touch the wheat, feeling its coolness slip between fingers. He inhales, picturing Arshot in their distant vineyard crushing grapes whose sweetness still eclipses Roman dust. For a moment the film suspends time, giving us space to sense that memory with him. The smell of sun-warmed fruit, the buzz of cicadas, the hum of domestic peace lost yet still treasured. Ridley Scott threads one gentle montage of recovery. Street musicians pluck lyres outside bathhouses, children chase wooden hoops along the Appian stones, senators debate, but in civil tones that drift like low wind through laurels. Even the caged kestrel in the palace garden begins to regrow feathers. Geta watches, bemused, as the bird flexes wings that may one day know sky again. Each vignette functions like a slow exhale, guiding us deeper into rest. Night falls. Rome glimmers beneath a sliver moon, its lamps now fewer because calm requires less illumination. Lucius wanders the Palatine Hill alone, stopping before the modest tomb of Maximus, newly restored at Lucilla's request. He lays a humble laurel wreath and kneels. Strength and honor, he whispers without marks. The camera pulls skyward, stars spilling across the frame in a velvet tide. Their brightness softens so no glare disturbs heavy eyelids. In a coda that gestures toward the film's closing act, Lucius receives an invitation from Acacius to serve as advisor on reforming Rome's gladiatorial laws, an olive branch extended under night's veil. He folds the parchment slowly, presses it to his chest, and turns toward the city below. Rome breathes, and for the first time in years, its breath feels warm, not feverish. We leave him there, a quiet sentinel between past and future, listening to cicadas begin their summer song along garden walls rebuilt from yesterday's ruin. Let those chirps guide you, gentle dream seeker. Let them merge with the hush of your own room, the faint percussion of your heartbeat against pillow, the soft sigh of sheets shifting. Imagine Rome's lanterns flickering in synchrony with distant stars, each pulse a promise that stories, like constellations, bend but do not break. Drift now, and when sleep has carried you far enough, Part 5 will be waiting with calm hands and closing pages, ready to cradle the final chapters of this moonlit epic. Outside the arena, grain warehouses stand full, their cedar walls cool and fragrant. Macrinus, now settled in Numidia, sends regular convoys of olive oil and dates, honoring a quiet pact to feed the people he once meant to incite. Denzel Washington's character appears only in a single letter read by Lucilla under lamplight, yet Scott frames the moment with such restraint, a lone candle, parchment trembling just slightly in the night air, that the exile's presence feels immediate. In that letter, Macrinus writes that the Empire's greatest spectacle will always be its ability to forgive. Connie Nielsen's eyes glisten, but she does not weep. Instead, she folds the page as though tucking hope into a pocket close to her heart. The twin emperors, too, have changed their hue. Geta spends longer hours in the palace aviary, watching the once crippled kestrel test new feathers against cautious drafts. The bird's first tentative glide is captured in a single unbroken shot, wings beating slow enough for viewers to count them in time with their own breaths. Caracalla, perhaps chastened by public sentiment, or merely intrigued by novelty, decrees the establishment of veterans' farms along the Tiber, lands where soldiers may till rather than bleed. Senators quietly grumble at the cost, but even their debates remain subdued, words sliding across marble floors like dry leaves. Rome seems to have discovered the power of speaking in low tones, and so disputes settle more often into compromise than clangor. One late afternoon, as cicadas begin their summer hymn, Lucius escorts a small procession through the newly peaceful arena. They carry amphorae of Numidian soil and handfuls of vine cuttings, the first step in transforming a corner of the empty hypogeum into a memorial garden. With each spadeful of foreign earth poured onto Roman ground, a hush falls, as though every grain is a word in a long postponed apology. The camera might drift overhead, capturing the patterns carved by shovels, and we, tucked in warm sheets far from those sands, may feel the weight of grudges gently lifted. That evening, Lucius returns to his chamber and fingers a token pendant carved from olive wood, a keepsake of Arashat. He presses it to his forehead, then to his chest, breathing once for memory and once for tomorrow. Paul Mescal delivers the motion with such stillness that the pendant appears to hover, suspended by the depth of his intention. Composer Harry Gregson Williams lays beneath the scene a single sustained chord voiced by low violas, so soft it could be mistaken for the ambient hum of nighttime air through an open window. On the Palatine, Lucilla stands beside the half-repaired statue of Victoria. Moonlight paints her profile silver as she watches distant torch lines weave along the Appian Way, convoys of grain carts set out under guard, a sight that once signaled taxation but now promises nourishment. She whispers a hope that Rome might learn to honor quiet triumphs as earnestly as loud ones. The words drift upward and seem to settle among fronds of a tall palm, rustling there like a faint lullaby, ready to coax the entire city toward sleep. Weeks pass. One mellow morning, Lucius prepares to leave for Numidia. He has accepted an imperial writ granting him stewardship of his old vineyard, now overgrown but salvageable. The reformation of the games will continue under Jugurtha and Hanno, who linger in the arena doorway to bid him farewell. Ridley Scott renders this departure without sweeping strings. Instead, we hear only the coo of doves and the distant rhythm of oars as traders push barges downriver. Lucilla meets her son at the city gate. They speak little, there is no need, but she presses into his palm a leather pouch filled with fresh seeds gathered from Rome's own fields. "Plant these beside the vines," she says. "Let both lands grow together." They part with hands still warm from the exchange, and the camera follows Lucius's shadow stretching long upon the road, a quiet herald pointing him home. The journey south is captured in a collage of sunrise skies, purling streams, and glimpses of hillside villages draped in late summer blooms. Whenever the wagon stops, Lucius kneels to press fingers into new soil, then releases a slow breath, as though thanking the earth for its patience. One evening, he camps beside ancient ruins where fireflies swirl in golden spirals. Their soft pulses mirror the steady crackle of his small fire, offering companionship that asks for nothing in return. Listeners nestled beneath their own blankets may find eyelids fluttering in sympathy, lulled by the imagined rhythm of those tiny lanterns. He reaches Numidia at last, and the vineyard greets him with tangled rows but resilient roots. The house where Arashat once sang now stands in quiet grace, vines curling along sun-bleached walls like lines of a half-remembered poem. Lucius walks the terraces, touching each trellis, and imagines next year's harvest already hanging heavy and sweet. Evening settles, heralded by a lone goat bell tolling slow quarter notes on a nearby slope. Paul Mescal's final scene is simple. He digs a small furrow, places Rome seeds inside, and pats the soil closed with the gentlest palm, as though closing a sleeping infant's fingers around a toy. The score lifts a single flute line that rises, holds, and fades, leaving only the hush of dusk. Ridley Scott's epilogue dissolves from that planted earth to a parchment scroll unrolling against black velvet. A quiet narrator, perhaps the soothing baritone of Derek Jacobi, returning to his role as Senator Gracchus, reads a brief note. In a time of swords and tyrants, one simple act of planting marked the start of a more temperate era. So Rome turns, slowly but surely, toward quieter days. The scroll curls closed, and with it the picture dims to darkness. Take a moment, gentle dream seeker, to let the fragrances of Numidian soil and Roman-spiced milk mingle in the cool night air of imagination. Feel the distant murmur of doves in renovated arches, the slow sweep of rakes smoothing sand, the hush of vines reaching ever skyward. Gladiator II leaves us not with a clash of steel, but with the warm pulse of possibility, a reminder that even empires can learn to whisper, and that the softest breaths may carry the greatest seeds of change. Now let your own breath lengthen. Settle deeper among your blankets. If your eyelids grow heavy, know that a sleep cinema will keep watch, its lanterns trimmed low and steady. When your dreams wander Rome's quiet streets, may they find laurel-scented breezes and the lull of distant lyres. And when dawn's first hush arrives, remember to share in the comments which film you would like us to explore together next, drifting once more upon gentle tides of story and sleep.